Getting ready to install our second solar system. We're using the old batteries that we used before, and of course that's obviously not good for heavy loads or anything. The only load it's going to have is the inverter and the charge controller. And here we have the inverter itself. So let's get started and open up this inverter box. Here's what was in the box. There's some more hardware right underneath there. Now let's figure out where we are going to put this thing. So here's the silicone grease that it came with. I just stuck a little bit of that on the end of this RJ11 connector here for the battery temperature sensor. Here's the batteries. We still don't have a fuse here yet. We'll stick that in later. And we're connecting it up to these terminals here, as you can see. The lugs and your bolts. That's what was in here. So just connect those up. And of course, soon we'll have our other boxes up here. But for now, we're going to run the AC. So we gotta go ahead and connect it to our AC box there. So we have our neutral and ground wired up. Then we have our hot wired up. It's off right now and it's going to stay off. We're going to wire up the DC first, and there's our slack. And of course we just go down here. And just have it wired up. Right where everything needs to be. So we can probably go ahead and put this cover back on. Now we're connecting the DC wiring. And of course, since all we have is batteries, notice we're not connected to anything right now. We're just hooking up the wires. And generally, you would have a nice disconnect switch. We're skimping on that for the moment in terms of the batteries we have aren't all that hot. They just serve as a temporary load since we're mainly sending electricity back to the grid. Seems to be hung on something. Take a look at that. The bolt just had a few nicks on it. So now we can stick these little nice and neat covers on. And eventually we will get a surge protector to stick on the outside here. Of course, we don't have anything connected to our chassis ground over here. However, this chassis ground is common with the AC ground here, the AC in anyway. So keep that in mind. Okay, the batteries are connected. As you can see, it is on and running. You can hear it humming. The inverter is on. We really don't want the inverter on, but we need to go ahead and power up the AC. So let's go ahead and turn that on here. Then we can put our cover back on the box here. So you'll see that yellow light, yellow LED flashing. It's thinking about it. It'll figure it out. Once it does, it'll probably stop making that noise. There we go. Now it's on the AC line. Thank you for watching so far. Next up, we'll have to install the boxes up here and the charge controller. And for anyone who's wondering why it's humming after you connect it to the grid when it's on the batteries, that's because it's charging the batteries. The batteries are only at about 50 volts or so, which is a little bit below the ideal charge or even standby voltage. So they're at about 12.71 volts per battery. The ideal is, of course, 13.5 or so. So that's why you can hear it humming. It's charging them. When it was humming before on the batteries alone, it was inverting. So there you go. And here's the breaker box, all nice and neat and labeled too. Okay, we've been lining up the holes where our boxes will be going, and we will not be mounting it to this, but we're marking the holes to see where our 2x4s need to mount. I'm just going to have 2x4s going across here to mount our circuit breaker box. This is the big baby box, Midnight Solar. And of course, our custom box for all the solar panels. And this should be good enough for 2 complete systems with 2 inverters, 1 for each side. So that's what we've got going on. Notice we just kind of lined up these guys and screwed them into place there. Put some Kapton tape underneath there. Pretty high dielectric strength stuff, so. Alright, and also, charge controller we marked the holes for right there and there. So we're going to put wood right across here, 2x4s, so we can always stick up a second charge controller. Alright, the classic 150 light out of the box. See the battery sensor, battery temperature sensor, and this bag was underneath here, right there. And there's the cable that goes to either your screen or your panel. And of course there's the ground fault pin, jumper pin. So if you pry this off from the sides, I already have it pre-pried a little bit. You'll see all the settings you can change and the light. And everything is right on the board for you to see. Of course, since I'm using a 48 volt battery, the only thing I did was turn on that third switch right there on the sys voltage, number 3. So that's about all I did. The IP is automatic. It's going to be connected to a switch. If I need to, I will make it static. That might be our best bet. All I really have to do, I think, for that is I'll probably just change and turn on number 4, and of course turn off the DHCP. So that's about it, though. I just changed one switch to make it run on 48 volts without a problem. Now it's time to just screw up onto the wall. So we're still putting up the boxes and stuff. Okay, the boxes are up and the wiring is pretty much complete. A simple explanation, obviously. This is going to be the ground for the solar panels. This isn't connected yet. We don't have that many solar panels yet. What we have is enough to fill up these 4 here. This is going to be the power, obviously. You got power from the panel arrays. Then it's a fused 10 amp fuse. And then the power goes, of course, to this 40 amp breaker. And you'll see I put these 2 together. Let's explain that later. Okay, 40 amp breaker. And basically it was explained on their forum, Midnight Solar. The plus here is where the greatest load potential will be. So obviously the solar panels represent the greatest load. A bunch of positive energy flowing this way in conventional current. And of course you got wire here, it goes down. That one wire goes down, and of course it comes right up to here, and of course, simply put, that's the PV positive. See that? Photovoltaic cells. Alright, simple enough. Of course, we got our ground here. Our ground just goes simply straight to the ground. Right here. Of course, that's PV negative. As you can see right there. And of course, that's all tied together in common. You could technically just run a big ground wire, probably a big ground wire to the battery, or to the main battery terminal there. and just have a bit of a ground going from the charge controller so it can have some power, since your main power is flowing ultimately from the panels to the batteries, but this is where it's being converted on the positive side. But it's simple enough to just put it into here, since it's going to be a higher current flowing anyway from the ground. So you got the ground there. That would be your battery. See that? Battery negative. So your battery negative just, of course, goes to the ground. Right here. Or should I say the negative? This is actually the ground. So negative. The ground is, of course, your chassis ground, which is, of course, your earth ground from your AC line. They're tied in common. So you got your ground right here. And, of course, that goes right over to here. Ground, and we don't have a ground for this yet, but we'll probably get one. We will probably connect this from here to here. Keep it simple. Now, PV positive goes in here. The battery positive is connected to here, but not directly. Take a look. Come through here. Goes up into here. It connects to these dual 50 amp breakers. These are connected in parallel. They sell an assembly with two of these guys in parallel automatically. I just manually made these parallel. As you can see, I tied the switches together with a piece of 12 gauge copper wire. So one pops, it's going to go off. And of course it comes out from here. And here again, this represents the greatest load on the plus plus. It's said that that charge controllers will fail short. So what that means is the greatest potential positive energy is going to be coming from your batteries in the case of trying to drive a short. So that's why this is arranged the way it is, with the charge controller as your main source, because the greatest potential from the panels goes, of course, to this 40 amp breaker. Greatest potential positive energy. Well, and then of course the batteries represent also, because if the charge controller also fell short again, then the greatest potential positive energy from the panels will probably end up tripping this. It's 40 amp. And of course the batteries, well, we have this positive line will be going to the batteries, the positive terminal right there. Then it's going to pop this 100 amp breaker. Of course, these little bitty batteries here won't be popping any 100 amp breakers. They're going to be popping the little 25 amp fuse there. And of course the battery temperature sensor is in place, all connected. And that wire kind of runs to a roll in there, right behind there, all the way up. So simply put, what does it say? Simple enough, battery temperature. Do not make use of the auxiliary ports, at least not at this moment. And of course, this is easy enough to understand. Plug to back of front cover. That means to either your graphical display unit, or in my case, the LED board. Alright, so that's the simple rundown. There's nothing complicated going on here, at least in my humble opinion. It's just wiring everything together in the way that makes sense. So we're fixing to fire it up here. So I'm assuming this should be open in the off position. I'm going to test that out soon enough. Of course, generally what you want to do is you'd have a breaker for the batteries, or just some kind of disconnect. I don't. These batteries aren't big enough for much of nothing yet, but soon enough we'll have a nice disconnect. So you disconnect it and everything would be powered off. And we're just gonna hook this up, and then we're gonna turn that on and see how everything works out. Of course, I'm gonna get the front panel of this back on soon enough.